Hey, everybody, welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey. This is your co-host, Liam DeBoer. Liam, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to be talking about Trump taking aim at globalist agendas in his UN speech and how Canada should listen. The Canadian safety minister admitting that the gun ban is about buying Quebec votes while voting against tougher sentences on repeat violent offenders. And Jimmy Kimmel returning to late night television and the difference between left wing and right wing cancel culture. All right, let's get started. All right, first off, we've got Trump takes aim at globalist agendas in his UN speech, and Canada should listen. At the 80th UN General Assembly, Donald Trump delivered a blunt rejection of globalist orthodoxy. He condemned the UN's fixation on mass migration and climate mandates as a double-tailed monster eroding developed nations, stressing that uncontrolled immigration overwhelms societies and green schemes bankrupt economies. Trump pointed to his record of border enforcement and affordable energy as proof common sense policies work, while contrasting with Canada's embrace of global compacts, strained public services, and self-sabotage of its energy sector. He blasted the UN's impotence in global conflicts, proposing measures like punitive tariffs on Russia to end the Ukraine war. While not without flaws or political maneuvering, Trump's America First vision resonated as a broader call for sovereignty, strength, and realism. For Canadians, his message underscored the divide between leaders prioritizing citizens versus those chasing applause from Davos elites, leaving families to pay the price for failed globalist experiments. So, what does Trump's UN speech reveal about the clash between globalism and sovereignty?
I think it ultimately reveals that we're at the 11th hour. You know, you don't usually see this kind of friction on the global stage. Most of these global elites, Western and Eastern, they stay aligned, at least publicly, right? You know, they sort of have their spats behind the curtain for sure, but in front of everybody, they don't do this kind of ideological fighting. They just don't do it. So for me, this says, well, two things. One, we're at a break point. Obviously, it's important enough to use this opportunity to make this sort of the foundation of his speech, and two, it's far enough along that we have to do something about it now. Right. So when you see these agendas come to light over time, so humans don't do a good job of planning down the road. We don't solve long-term problems today. We don't really start with that. We wait until we have we wait until things are on fire. I would say that's one of the major crux of humanity. Cruxes? Cruxi? Crux. And anyway, it's a big problem that we do have. And so for him to be doing this, I think this really shows you, like, it gives the people a good sense of where things are really at, right? Because a lot of times politicians tell you one thing, but it's another. They use the media to spout off their own propaganda. You don't really get reality. But in this case, you're seeing this on the global stage coming from Trump. It's like, hey, this should be a bit of a wake-up call. Because some of these governments he's talking about are right-wing. Most of them are left-wing, and a lot of this ideology came from the left wing. But this isn't really as much of a partisanship as it is, we're at a fork in the road. We have to go one direction or the other. And sort of like you said, it's either sovereignty or globalism. And, you know, I think that there's an economic case you can make for both. And I think if you're intelligent and you understand macroeconomics well, I think you could probably make a pretty good argument to most people. However, I do believe that, you and I have talked about this on the podcast, we are looking at a declining birth rate globally. It's at a 60-year low. It's going to continue down this path. And I think that we have sort of seen, you know, our population may grow, but I think the productive components of it are starting to diminish a little bit. So globalism is effectively falling apart. It will take a long time and people will fight it tooth and nail. No question. But I do think we need to start looking at the world in different pockets. And you had sort of a theory on this of breaking it down into 5 or 6 different pockets. When you look at North America, you've sort of got, sure, you got Canada down to like basically Panama kind of idea in that range. Even if you just said Mexico, United States, Canada, sure. So this is kind of where things are going. And over here in you know, this side of the world, we've got a lot going for us. Got a lot of resources. We've got a lot of not just like physical resources, but people resources that are very capable, very intelligent. So I do think it makes more sense to sort of understand where the landscape is going and then start driving in that direction. So his speech was more inflammatory, but I think when you break it down to the foundation, I think that's why this is more important.
I thought the most interesting thing about the speech and, well, his whole even appearance at the UN was, did you see how they were screwing with him? How the UN was trolling him?
No.
So they shut down the escalator as soon as him and Melania Trump got on. Now,
Right.
You could say that was a complete fluke and technical glitch, essentially. But on Sunday, the Times had reported that UN staffers were reportedly talking about shutting down the escalator while Trump got on it. So that's just a crazy level of pettiness. But then also, his teleprompter shut off.
Right.
And because this is the thing, is that, like, you know, you can sit there, and I actually even agree, right? Say a lot of people on the left will look at Trump in the way he talks, and he cracks me up because he will just, like, really essentially troll and make fun of these people on a stage.
He says shit. He even said the other day with RFK on stage, he's like, RFK, you're going to watch the things that you say, and that's good, but I'm not going to. I don't really care. I'm like, all right, man, have at her. Let's go.
Like, that's wild for a world leader, considering when you, throughout history,
especially
it's always
the
like
world leader,
right?
Like you're leader of America,
right? And especially, you know, throughout world history, any of those types of people have a very, very structured way that they portray themselves to the world.
Obama's a perfect example,
right? And that's why you see, like, such a big difference between front-facing politicians or public figures, and then in their private lives are often the complete opposite of what they say they are. But with him, he's just blatantly out there and in the open in Trump. And yeah, it is kind of wild for a world leader at some points and sometimes. But then also, like, tell me how that doesn't just blow up in the UN's face, in the sense where they go, we're going to get rid of your teleprompter so you don't have your prepared speech to give us. And then he just goes, I'll go 60 minutes off the dome trolling you. Like, and so I get that the left is saying,
and also the thing with the escalator, he's like, it's okay, Melania's in good shape, she can handle the stairs. I'm like, yo, he throws his wife sort of a compliment. The whole thing, he just basically made them look bad.
So, like,
it was good. It was well done.
They do it to themselves. Like, you can't treat a man this petty and then say, look around and how he's embarrassing us. It's like, you're doing everything you can to embarrass him.
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is an ideological war, right? So we're used to seeing the ideological war between China, Russia, and the East versus the West, right? One is like, oh, well, one's communism, the other's capitalism, like basic, just to simplify, right? But now you're seeing it internally. You are seeing the left, which has become, well, they call themselves anti-fascist while using similar tactics to fascism. They're
the same tactics.
Yeah. They're really getting in from they're going from like a reasonable amount of social structure, schools, firefighters, police. I know you need some. I agree with some social programs totally, but now it's becoming far more like communism because they're breaking capitalism. So the ideological war is happening within. This is what's so different. And I don't agree with everything Trump says. I don't agree with everything on his agenda. And like I said, he is guilty of playing politics and favoring elites over the people. And, for people that challenge that, I would say, well, he promised to cut the budget. That's not happening. He promised no more wars. That's not happening. He promised the Epstein list. That's not happening. So don't tell me that he's doing everything right. He's not doing everything right. Nobody does. And that's okay. But by and large, his America First message is resonating with people because it's not just about America. It's about nations standing up for themselves instead of bowing to these globalist agendas. This is what the people want. That's why I also think that speech was so effective.
Right. And yeah, into you see these agendas so blatantly now that the false narrative they've kind of twisted, other than, the 30% of the population that just buys the whole propaganda wholesale and then becomes like violent against anyone who doesn't also accept it.
Because words are violence, Liam.
Yeah. But you can see it so clearly now, the game that these, say, UN type organizations or the World Economic Forum, they're a lot of the same people that go between these groups, and they have signed a strategic framework saying that they're working on the same agenda, the World Economic Forum and the UN. But you look at this agenda that they're pushing where, simultaneously you're getting told in the West that having a dog is bad for carbon emissions, or you shouldn't have kids because it's that's going to up our emissions over the next couple generations. But then simultaneously, the exact same news outlets that are telling you not to have kids to save the climate are saying that migrants are going to be the savior to our population collapse. And so it's just so blatantly out there now as to how hostile these agendas are to nations. And so I think it's now at that point where even just your common citizen is like, look, I actually don't think I have any racist beliefs, but if me thinking that mass migration is an issue is going to get me called a racist at this point, then I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Like,
your terms mean nothing to me anymore.
Right. The label of racist is less consequential than this policy that is going unchecked.
Yeah, they've diluted the term, though. It takes time, and they throw it at everything, and all of a sudden it doesn't matter anymore.
Right. And so, but just circling back to your point about ideological war, is I think that kind of spell that has been cast by this propaganda for the last decade or two is starting to wear off. And that's why we're seeing so much rejection of these UN type agendas and kind of a pushback towards sovereignty.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like I said earlier, we're sort of at this fork in the road, where we choose globalism, or we choose sort of like nationalism, sovereignty. You know, people can throw whatever label they want to throw on it and tell me that it's bad or terrible because it's racist or xenophobic. But this has nothing to do with kicking people out of this country, really. I don't really think you need to do that. I think you need to stop letting people in so quickly. I think that's got to stop. I also think that you need to find a way to prioritize the people that are here and prioritize what's good for your country. Because we're doing all these things, like the climate is a good example. You know, he gets into this double-tailed monster about the climate. Canada should have been leveraging its natural resources to the fullest extent for a very long time. And I've said this before. If we leveraged our natural gas, Canada only emits 1.4% of global carbon emissions. So we can't really move the needle that much. Even if we reduce it by 10, even 20%, you know what I mean? We're a fraction of a percentage on the global stage. But had we been leveraging our natural resources effectively, really our LNG more than anything, if we'd been doing that, we have half a dozen countries in Europe and Japan that wanted to buy it at scale for the next 20, 30 years, and we have enough to power the world for 209 years. We have the most of anywhere in the world. If we had been doing that and offshoring it to these people, they would be able to reduce their carbon footprint by so much that we would do far more for the world than we could ever do on our own. So when you just take a look at that, you know, this is what's so preposterous to me. Not only would it have been best for the country, it would have been better for the world. So it just shows you that this whole agenda is nothing but absolute nonsense. It's all virtue signaling, and it's all about power and profit over people. None of this stuff is actually for the betterment of mankind. And it's just, it's quite frustrating. And I think it's sort of one of the foundational reasons why I do what I do and speak out and talk about these things, is because life is just so backwards, run by these idiots right now. Actually, not that stupid. They know exactly what they're doing. They're just treating us like idiots. And I hope that, you know, for better or worse, you know, Donald Trump, I am hopeful that his message starts to resonate and people start to vote, understanding that, hey, we need to turn the tide here. We need to go back this other way. Otherwise, there will be nothing left. So, you know, it's a brick in a wall, as I like to say. Your life is building a castle, and every day you try to put another brick in the wall. That's all this was from Trump. But for me, it was a good one. It was a good one to see out there.
The last thing that I'll touch on that is just when it comes to, say, the mass immigrations or the whether people need to go or stay conversation, I think you can really solve that issue without mass deportations, and pretty quickly, is you do it through two mechanisms. One, you shut off the social welfare systems for any new migrants. Mm-hmm. I don't think you should be able to move here and immediately start claiming welfare and stuff like that.
Agreed.
Also, too, even I just had somebody recently reach out to me. They were of Indian nationality, and they had come to Canada, but he was telling me about how many people in his community, I believe he's from Brampton, are bragging, openly talking about how they use false asylum claims to get here, and then they also get money from our government while they're here and access to all of the social structures, healthcare, etc. And so that can't be happening. And so I think as soon as you shut off that like essentially social welfare fund for people that are just walking into the country, I think you see mass amount of people leave voluntarily. And then also the other one is just criminals. Like at this point, we covered it with Sam Cooper, right? Like these open border policies are facilitating crime in a major way. And so if you just properly apply laws to those that break them, it's like, then you get rid of that problem. You don't need actually like massive deportations. But anyways, the whole crime issue leads us into our next topic, which is Canadian Safety Minister admits gun ban is about Quebec votes while voting against tougher sentences on repeat violent offenders. So Canada's justice system is caught in a paradox. On one hand, Parliament just voted down a Conservative motion to impose tougher sentences on repeat violent offenders. Criminals convicted of 3 serious violent crimes would still be eligible for bail, parole, and even house arrest. On the other, the Liberal government is pressing ahead with a $1 billion gun buyback program targeting licensed, law-abiding owners of rifles like the AR-15. Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasundagri even admitted privately that the ban isn't about safety at all. It's about securing votes in Quebec and following Mark Carney's mandate. Meanwhile, Statistics Canada data shows that most gun crimes involve illegal handguns smuggled from the US, not the firearms being banned. The result is a system that turns ordinary Canadians into scapegoats while violent repeat offenders are cycled back onto the streets. It's politics wearing the mask of safety while public trust in security erodes. So, what does this say about the government's true priorities?
Exactly what we've been saying. It's profit and power over the people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really care. But you can't, look, there's a couple of things that you can't exist at the same time. You can't have lax laws. You can't have these catch and release rules. You can't have no 3 strikes rule. You can't have an open border and an increase in a massive increase in organized crime and other crime. You can't have all of those things. And now lesser penalties for people that are considered part of marginalized communities. Like you saw it, they're seeing it all the time now. A guy that repeatedly sexually assaulted a 12-year-old girl got a significantly smaller sentence because he's indigenous. What are you talking about? Are you saying that because he's indigenous? What, is he not intelligent enough to understand his actions? What are you saying? Is he too stupid? Is he not capable? That's actually quite racist. I would say he knows exactly what he's doing and should pay the full price for that.
Mm-hmm.
Saying the other day, an indigenous guy, and I don't mean to pick on indigenous, it could be anything. It's just these are the last 2 I saw in the last 2 days. An indigenous guy bit off his neighbor's ear. It's just like, you got 1 day in jail. I would bear trap that motherfucker. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? Bite off my ear. But this is the way of the world, right? So you can't have all of those things, and then at the same time, implement no castle laws, not allow people to defend themselves, and take away all their guns, and tell me you're doing this for the betterment of society. That's just, the whole thing is just so hypocritical in and of itself. When you just look at that mess, this is not what's going on. Their priorities are maintaining power. That's all this is about. And that's why he said this. This Anandasundagri dude has stuck both his feet in his mouth already in the first 6 months.
His cheeks are so big.
It's so good. I love it. It's so good. But you know what? Like, I don't know if he's stupid or just genuinely decent or just, I don't know. I don't know what it is. But he always admits it. He's like, I fucked up there. I said that. And with the not understanding anything about the guns and the licensing.
I don't think he even took accountability for that, though, and admitted he fucked up. He tried to say he was joking. He was like, that was just a joke about gun buyback.
No, he said, from what I read, he goes, I was saying it in private, though. like he was like, yeah, I did. I said it. But like, it was in private. Like, not trying to deny it. And because Mark Carney came out and goes, I still trust him. I think it's okay. And if his stance was it's a joke, I'm not sure Carney would have even had to make a statement. Anyway, regardless, it doesn't really move the needle either way. I just think it's funny that this guy's done that both times and been like, yeah, my bad. Good for you, man. Government's upside down. They only care about maintaining power.
Yeah, well, the fact that Gary Anandasundagri is in countless scandals involving terrorist organizations.
Okay, so he's not that
decent. Now in 3 and 4. There's now 3 or 4 different scandals with him involved with the terrorist organization, including being listed at a fundraising office. And then
that's the Tamil Tigers.
Yeah. And then you've got him. he's the one in charge of disarming Canadians. And also on top of that, you've got him voting against removing bail from violent criminals, repeat violent criminals. But this actually, I think, leads us into a bigger conversation about violent crime and these penalties, and how, we have to look at it now as if this is the outcome that they want, because Cremieux showed statistics about the different cutoffs for strike rules, and he's a commentator on Twitter, but he's really good. He just breaks down studies and data. And anyways, so he said he shows how, from crime statistics, a 10-strike law preventing people from leaving prison after that many violent crime convictions would reduce period violent crime by 20%. 5 strikes would cut it by 40%. 3 strikes would halve violent crime, and 2 strikes would remove 2/3 of violent crime.
That's wild.
Yeah. And so,
how can you look at that and not go, oh, this is exactly what we have to do? So once again, what are their true priorities? That is so objectively clear.
You implement a 3-strike policy, you get rid of 50% of crime.
And it's very reasonable. People can do stupid things once. I don't really agree with doing stupid things twice. But if you do it a third time, you're a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Like, I'm all for it. That's wild. Those are really crazy numbers.
I also think there needs to be a penalty somewhere along the line. Like, I am completely on board whether this is in individual level or how, like, say, the legal system should operate, is the tit for tat strategy. Now, it's not an eye for an
like,
eye.
You rape somebody, you get raped?
No, but an appropriate prison sentence or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the tat. I mean, that kind of achieves the same thing.
Yeah,
though.
that's true.
But so with a tit for tat strategy is that after the idea is let's say somebody strikes you, you strike them back, but then you stop after that and you reassess and you go, are we able to negotiate on terms to essentially get rid of this behavior, this conflict? And so when it comes to these criminals, it's like, you need that penalty. But right now there's no tat whatsoever.
There's no strike back. They just keep getting to move forward.
Right.
Yeah.
But the very important concept of that strategy is that you do go back to the negotiating table afterwards and allow essentially the chance for redemption, because then otherwise you do just spiral into an eye for an eye kind of mentality. The other statistics that I found very interesting, now this is in regards to New York City. However, I think while the numbers wouldn't be the exact same, I think the pattern would be across multiple Western nations, is that the vast majority of crime is done by just a few individuals.
Yeah.
However, if you also look at the area as to where crimes are committed, in New York City, 75% of the violent crimes happen on less than 10% of the streets.
Makes sense.
So this is a very localized issue that you can deal with. And it's the same thing in Canada, actually. Like, when a lot of people go, oh, the crime, and we talk about how out of control the crime is, but it's like they take over boroughs and sectors. And so it's actually not that hard to clamp down because they're already centralized. It's like, you look at, okay, you all of a sudden start properly enforcing the law in a place like Peel, where the vast majority of home invasions and also, say, trucking, drug distributions, when you see them extortion, trying to blackmail, shooting up people's homes, it's like it's all happening within this small region. But the longer that you let it occur, the more that region's going to grow.
Of course, because people start carving out territories.
Right.
It's just like, it's the same. I remember Sam Cooper said this. When you have, because we're a big part of the fentanyl problem, when you produce a lot of drugs, you have a supply and demand issue where you have too much supply you outpace demand. So prices go down. So now it's much cheaper to enter the drug market.
Right.
So if you do the same thing, so it's like, if you allow people to buy drugs cheaper in Canada, they will come to Canada to get their drugs and sell them wherever. Now, if you own this city block, maybe you and I'll get into a firefight once or twice, but we each lose a couple guys. Someone's going to be king of the jungle and the other person's going to move to what? Another territory. And the thing is, it's like all these other little policies and all allowing people to get away with it and not having a 3-strike rule, it emboldens these people to become more organized. Now you have organized criminals that are taking over city blocks or boroughs, as you put it. And then it's like, this one's taken, I'll just shift to this one.
Right.
Because there are still people, there is still easy prey around the corner. And then it just continues to swell. And this is what's happening across the country. So like you said, if you don't nip it in the bud, if you don't find a way to tackle this problem, you're always going to have crime. And it's always going to be in bigger cities primarily. Anytime a small town gets rocked by something crazy, it makes the news, murder, something, this, that, whatever. Big cities, how many people got murdered on the weekend? Probably half a dozen, not even kidding. At least that many people got shot. I see it on the ticker all the time. So you look at that and you're going to go, okay, this is what's going to happen here. But you want to try to contain it as much as possible. You let it swell, and then it starts taking over the GTA. Then it starts taking over the province. Then it starts taking over the country, etc. However you want to look at it. But that is the ramifications of these actions. And then they kind of get to the bigger, and I don't want to go too far down this third line, because I think we'll just lose focus a bit here. But when I think about their priorities, I think about power and profit. That's what I always think. Power and profit over the people. It's a saying that I made up, and I say it all the time. Someone else may have said it as well. As far as I know, I made it up. So that is kind of their North Star, as far as I'm concerned. Now, if you think about maintaining power, what do you need? You need to have power over the people. So again, you let these people get away with these things. You create sort of these things that are these rules that don't work together, or collectively allow things to get worse. You know what I mean? No castle laws, lax bail, no 3-strike rule, stuff like that, right? So you let that happen, and then what do you do as a government? Now it's time for more power. Now I'm going to implement policy to put a tighter grip on the people, which is exactly what this is about, in my opinion. So it's just, you kind of, if you look further down the road 10 years from now, on the path that we are on right now, I think there's going to be such a significant amount of control that over the people by the government, that we will essentially live in a China 2.0, to the point like China employs communism, but they also have all these capitalist cities. Capitalist in quotes, I should put there, because if you have a successful business, you have a government employee in your building. Mm-hmm. And the government uses your business like a chessboard, and they play the rest of the world. So they make the decisions for your company. It's going to be very similar here. You're going to have a social credit system. You're going to have them in power. You're going to have censorship, digital wallets, all these things, 15-minute cities, all coming here. But the thing is, you're going to feel more free because they know how to paint a prettier picture. But it's the same shit.
Yeah, I think the last two statistics to highlight here as well is, I briefly touched on it, but to your point about them using this as a power grab to crack down on law-abiding citizens while allowing the problem to still run rampant, you look at, okay, yes, the amount of firearms that are used in crimes or homicides, all of this kind of stuff. If you listen to the Peel police chief, he was saying that 90% of the firearms that they confiscate due to crime are illegally smuggled into the country. The other 10% are unidentifiable. They don't know where they came from. Right. But he assumes that if you did know where they came from, you'd get the same answer. So nearly 100% of the firearms used in crimes are illegally smuggled in. So making more firearms illegal in Canada doesn't fix that problem at all.
No, it just renders the citizens unable to defend themselves.
And I thought that this was the craziest stat that complements that as well, where licensed gun owners in this country are already some of the most vetted, law-abiding citizens around, and they are statistically less likely to commit homicide than the average Canadian.
Today's podcast is brought to you by All Day Coffee. Do you love your coffee but overdo it sometimes? Get the jitters, a little anxiety, or have sleepless nights if you sneak in a cup just a little too late? Well, I do. That's why we're excited to partner with All Day Coffee, a specialty roaster started by good friends of ours. They make great coffee with different caffeine levels. They have decaf, quarter calf, half calf, or full calf. That means you can still enjoy your morning cup, an afternoon pick-me-up, or an evening brew without the shakes or the crash. Personally, I've switched to half calf, and it's been a game changer for me. For a limited time, all new customers get 20% off and free shipping by using the code WELCOME20. That's WELCOME20. Try it now at alldaycoffee.co and see why I made the switch.
All right, last story for the day. We've got Jimmy Kimmel returns to late night TV and the difference between left-wing and right-wing cancel culture. Jimmy Kimmel's return to late night TV came amid a firestorm after ABC suspended Jimmy Kimmel Live for 6 days over his controversial remarks about the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. The network reversed course and reinstated him. On his comeback broadcast, Kimmel delivered a monologue claiming that he never intended to politicize the tragedy while defending free free speech and condemning efforts to silence satire. Despite network backing, several major ABC affiliates owned by Sinclair and Nexstar refused to air the episode, citing objections to his comments. His return underscored tensions around censorship, media coercion, and the delicate balance between commentary and accountability in modern late-night TV. So, how does his suspension and return highlight the double standard in cancel culture?
I really don't agree with cancel culture on either side. Obviously you don't like to see it when it's happening to people on the right, because in our current circumstance, we agree with more of their opinions. But I also don't really agree with it on the left either. But there's a couple things I would say. First of all, if you're working for a company like ABC or Disney, there are some standards you have to stick to. I've been on network television. When you do that, they give you some guidelines to work through. You sign a contract. You don't have to say what they want you to say, but there are things you shouldn't say that doesn't necessarily represent the network very well. So you can fall into that line of fire. That can happen. You could just say some wild shit that has nothing to do with politics that'll get you canned really, really quickly, right? You know what I mean? Like, you could incite violence on someone that slept with your wife, for example. That's not political at all. You're gone. You're 100% gone. So there are standards that exist within a network, and they can employ those standards as they see fit. That I'm cool with. The other thing that I will say is, I don't think that Charlie Kirk would have wanted him canceled. I think ultimately you beat bad ideas with better ideas. That's how I see most things. But I'll also say I despise Jimmy Kimmel. I didn't really care, when he was on the Man Show, which is apparently an era that the left has completely forgot about. But since he's been on late night television, I don't really agree with any of his opinions. I don't agree with how he sees the world. I think he's a left-wing mouthpiece. I think that's all it is. Through COVID, when he was basically saying the unvaxxed can be left for dead, I'm like, okay, you don't, like, ever since then I had zero respect for the guy. Let's put it that way. However, I just don't think he should be canceled. I just don't think he should have been canceled. And I'm glad that he's back on air. And what's interesting? That now these local broadcasters are like, no, we don't want him. I'm good with that. I like that. It's like, well, the network doesn't need to cancel him. We don't need to cancel people like that, providing he doesn't fall in that line of fire, like I said earlier. But I like that local broadcasters are like, you know what? No, this doesn't work for me. But now you have that right to employ, whether or not you want to show his content, are totally up to you. I'm really good with that. But to your question, I guess, about the double standard, yeah, it's ridiculous. All you have to do is, like, literally pick any anchor that is online, that is on mainstream media, and you will find them celebrating the cancellation of all the people on the right and condemning the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel on the left. You see all these people on the right get canceled over the last several years, and no one bat an eye. No one cares. Kimmel gets canceled, and then 400 people from Hollywood, essentially, let's say, they signed this. It was from the ACLU, I think. They signed this document, basically, not boycotting Disney, but like trying to challenge them to get them back on the air. And maybe that's one of the things that moved the needle. I don't really know. You see all this support from their side, or when it happens on the other side, they're cheering about it. I think more people need to see it the same way that I do, where it's like, hey, look, let's not cancel anybody. They can have their journalistic standards for the network, but let's let people's ideas just kind of exist and see who wins there.
So, okay, to stress test you then, because I think I fell into this whenever I first started talking about things online as well, of the kind of the absolutist idea, say, towards free speech, or, you know what, I have always had actually a very nuanced opinion on cancel culture, and I've said that for a long time since I first started doing this. So I'm not switching positions now or anything, is that this is a human characteristic. I think every tribe, every group, every country, every organization, company has the right to push out people that have pathological behaviors. Now, the big difference is between opinions and behaviors. If somebody goes online, on air, so for instance, Jimmy Kimmel saying that the Kirk shooter was a mega Republican and, tossing shade at conservatives, saying that they were trying to make it seem like he was anything other than one of them, I don't think that's cancelable offense. I think it's a lie. I think he knew what he was saying was false.
100% he did.
But that's not strong enough to make a hardcore line like, who am I, even though I have my inkling, I can't definitively say whether that was a lie or whether he was just wrong.
I think he knew what he was doing, but it seemed like they were looking for an excuse to nix him.
For sure. Well, I actually think it probably goes deeper than that even. However, when he sits there and calls for the death to allow 25% of the American population to die without medical attention and is laughing about it, riling up, getting a crowd to applaud it, that's sadistic behavior. That is taking pleasure in the potential or actual suffering of others. That to me is just, I don't care whether that's a left wing coming from a left wing person, a right wing person. If you are taking pleasure in the suffering of others, that's sadistic behavior that any rational and sane society cannot tolerate. Now, I think there needs to be room for redemption in that scenario. You need to, like, just like I was saying with the tit for tat kind of thing, you need to allow people to come back to the table and say, yeah, okay, that was unacceptable.
Yeah.
And then watch their behavior from now on and go, have you actually learned from that mistake? And, there's actually correction there. So I think that's really important when it comes to the canceling aspect. But I think we all agree that at some point there is reasonable, like even say, for instance, the free speech absolutist side of things. Do you think somebody should be able to walk up to somebody in a public square and say, "I'll pay somebody $100 to kill this man"?
So
it's like
my own lines. Like if I think inciting violence is important. I think that's a reasonable line we can all agree on. But like legitimate, like clear inciting violence, not allowed to have some sort of flexible, arbitrary view of the term. Like, well, they're combating. They're protesting against. Gender ideology in schools, therefore they're anti-LGBT, therefore that's a weaker community and this is inciting violence. Like, no, chill the fuck out. Like legitimate, like you said, hired to kill that guy. Yeah, that's I'm good with that. The other issue I have online is doxing people. I'm not cool with that either. But like, those are pretty well the lines. Like if I had my own social platform, those would pretty well be the lines.
Because here, okay, if I'm thinking of this as war strategy, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about this as ideological war, as cultural warfare, and it definitely is. We're at that point. Then think about this strategy. Now, you have, after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, you have a bunch of influential people on the left openly cheering his assassination, calling for more of it. University of Toronto professor, right, saying that killing somebody like him with a bullet is humane. You've got Destiny, who is calling on streams for more violence because
that's inciting violence.
Quote, because conservatives should fear going to speak in public.
Yep.
Now, my point being, let's say you are the left, you're this establishment machine, and you see there starting to be a valid canceling response to people that are cheering the assassination and calling for more violence against conservatives.
Yes.
What do? You create a scenario that stops that domino of cancellations. So you can, I think, now this is a little tinfoil hatty, but I think behind the scenes, you go, we're going to make it seem like we fired one of our people, because there wasn't direct force from Trump's administration. The FCC guy said a comment that I don't think he should have said on that podcast about we can do this the easy way or the hard way.
There seemed that there was a financial incentive because of a large multi-billion-dollar deal happening on the back end.
Right. But there's nothing concrete. It's not like the White House, who was directly sending emails to YouTube, Twitter, Facebook during the Biden administration saying, take down these platforms.
Yes.
There wasn't direct communication. Now, again, I do think it was irresponsible of the FCC commissioner to say that.
Yeah, I agree.
However, there was no direct threat as to the removal or state coercion over the Jimmy Kimmel scenario. So let's say you're this media establishment. Well, we can create a justifiable outrage for quote unquote cancel culture from the right, getting rid of Jimmy Kimmel when even I agree that those comments he said about the mega shooter don't warrant being fired. Well, now you've just stopped that domino line of falling, because now as a culture, as a society, we all look at it and go, oh yeah, guys, we can't cancel people. We can't fall into the same things for those Charlie Kirk opinions as that other team. So they stop that broader movement, which I think is actually necessary, because you cannot have university professors calling for the death of conservatives. You cannot have influential podcasters with millions of viewers openly calling for the death of 50% of the country. And so like and this is where my kind of more nuanced opinion with cancel culture is that, again, it's behavior. Just like how I think it would be completely, we talked about it a week or two ago in regards to the guy that just got arrested and got 10 years in prison in Canada for Nazi stuff. It wasn't just that he said an opinion like that he thought Hitler was good. It was that he was making propaganda calling for the death of Jews for a terrorist organization.
Yes.
And so like that, I go, yeah, I can see that there should probably be some sort of penalty, whether you want to talk about it being too much as 10 years or whether you should add more. Like, sure, that's up for debate, but I think everybody goes, yeah, you should probably face some consequences for making death cult propaganda.
Sure.
The same thing needs to happen on the left. And I think this Jimmy Kimmel thing was actually a very brilliant strategy to stop that movement of justified cancellations.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. It makes sense. You picked a character that no one really liked on the right because he's just said vile things over the last 5 years or so. And you took an instance which you can argue was cancelable or not, whatever. I don't think it was, but I could see that. And you do stifle people. But one of the things, though, that I'd point out is a lot of these teachers were either NMPs, people were suspended, some people were fired, not enough. When it comes to that, though, when it comes to a position of authority, the landscape changes. If you take on a role as someone that is an authority figure in the lives of children, for example, like a teacher, you have to be held to a different standard under that banner. You just do. It's like you don't get to do or say those things. And there are ways to soft pedal it so it doesn't seem so direct. I didn't hear what Destiny said, but if he was directly saying that, or if he sort of, like you can soft pedal it, you can sort of insinuate. And I think that's one of those spaces where if someone has a nuanced sort of insinuation, I think you kind of have to let it go. But when you're seeing people do this in any position of authority whatsoever, and they are inciting violence, yeah, you have to take action. But that is a bright red line as to what I said earlier. If you're inciting violence and it's clear, yeah, you need to take action. You need to. But I mean, so do you think, I agree with your perspective, but so do you think that this just puts the Republicans or the conservatives on their heels again and puts the Democrats on their front foot, kind of on the attack again? Sure. And that's what you think this is about?
Yeah, 100%. I think it was a narrative capture of the thing because now people are getting to the point where they're arguing about, left wing, and I have to denounce both left wing and right wing cancel culture because, look, again, I'm not calling for structural censorship or giving the government more force. I think, again, the FCC guy stepped over the line with those kind of public comments. However, the idea that like a culture and a society can't push out pathological behavior to me is just ridiculous. But now we're in this debate about like left-wing versus right-wing cancel culture, and people are trying to...
Everybody got sidebarred from their...
People are trying to say, both sides do it. You're like, no. You had a Trump administration executive make a offside comment on a podcast, no official action. On the left, we have had a decade of violent riots, whether it be the Milo Yiannopoulos at UC Berkeley in 2017, where they burned the school down to stop him from speaking. You have the Evergreen estate affair with, not estate, but Evergreen school affair with Brett Weinstein, where he said that he doesn't think white people should be forced to stay off of campus for a day.
Because that's ridiculous.
Right. And the mob descended on him to the point where the police were like, we can't ensure your safety because people were roaming around the campus with baseball bats. And so Brett Weinstein ended up having to step down and take a settlement and couldn't be a professor anymore. You've got Jordan Peterson, who's getting his credentials removed because he said that gender affirming care for kids is trans butchery.
It's subjective.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've got him or his body positivity comments where he said the over plus sized Sports Illustrated model wasn't beautiful.
That's also really unhealthy.
That got his
objectively unhealthy.
So that got him sentenced to re-education and also to like social media training, quote unquote, and also his credentials under threat of being pulled as a psychologist. You've got all throughout COVID, the Biden administration directly censoring YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, giving them handles, putting FBI officers to the point where they're targeting
the organization.
They're targeting people with 100 followers on their account on Twitter. Like that's how tax dollars were being spent while criminals roam free. You've got the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people across the world that lost their jobs for not taking the vaccine mandates, that got pushed out of society and not allowed to go to a restaurant.
We let people in. We didn't stop.
They took Trump off of Twitter on January 8th. They took a sitting president off of Twitter.
Yeah.
And then so
that's one of the ones too that I saw a lot of people in the media saying that should happen. But now they're bitching because Kimmel gets canceled. I'm like, guys.
And so this is the point about all of this Kimmel stuff to me is that, yeah, maybe it's a little bit of a nonsense, but look at how effectively they're controlling the narrative when now they've got conservatives on their back foot being like, we're not hypocrites. And you're like, you know what? Even if you are being a little bit hypocritical, and I don't condone being a hypocrite, I really try not to be in my life. But if you're trying to say that that is as much of a moral transgression as creating a global censorship machine that can ruin people's lives and completely exile them from professional life, freeze bank accounts for crypto purchases, take down the Freedom Convoy truckers. You look at that machine that's been created over the last 10, 15 years for the left, you're like, this is the Star Wars type empire. The right-wing cancel culture is like a fucking stick and move guerrilla warfare. Like, oh, we caused a nuisance and we annoyed you guys for a day. But like, you guys have a empire of censorship.
I agree with you. I totally see it. However, I am of the opinion that two wrongs don't make a right. I still stand behind the fact that you shouldn't be canceling people, whether they're on the right or the left. But but it's very clear that the destructive force in all of this is coming from the left. So what do? Because canceling people really isn't the right thing to do. So what do you do?
I wrote an entire article on this and did a video that went out last night about it. It's like 45 minutes long, so I went really delved in.
Johnny Cole's notes. Let's go.
Well, at the very end, I pretty much say the problem isn't that the right isn't strong enough. It's that the left is too powerful, too institutional. And so I am completely, and this is why I think I am completely on board with Trump's agenda to go after the NGOs. Take down these NGOs that are publicly funding these left-wing militant
war
groups.
About taking down the foundational structure that supports it.
Right. So the Antifa type group that I'm talking about, burning down the UC Berkeley, or that also shut down the Canada First protest just 2 weeks ago, violently pushing them out of the park. That organization is completely funded and works together with government-funded liberal NGOs, like even the Anti-Hate Canada Network. It's a publicly funded network.
Yeah, I've done work on them before. All they do is hate. Yeah.
All they do is label anybody that disagrees with Marxist ideas as fascists.
Yes.
And then they have admitted that they have worked with Antifa before.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you need to dismantle this machine. And that's what I'm calling for. Not for the right to build their own censorship or exile machine, but we can't do that. You can't actually attack that system and that empire if you pretend like, well, both sides do this a little bit. You're like, no. This is not the same.
I'm with you. I agree. I think I think that is the right approach. It's like, use this as the opportunity to identify that these two sides are not equal. We are not in harmony. We're not on equal footing, and you have to do something to break down the power structure behind all of it. It's less about the individual. So this is important, though. It's less about the individuals. Don't focus on the individuals. Focus on the power structure behind it that is supporting and fueling it. That's where you have to. That's how you move the needle on this. That's actually what it is. If you take away their sustenance or their capacity to operate, then this will become a disorganized mess and it will dissipate. So I think that's a very valuable response. I appreciate that, because I'm like, well, what do you do? Because I think what happens sometimes is people don't see what you just highlighted. And that's why I wanted you to do that. They don't see behind the curtain. They don't look at the foundation. They just go tit for tat, bucket, eye for an eye. And that's not going to work. So no, I appreciate that response.
Yeah, and to me, as long as the narrative is at all trying to be like, oh yeah, sitting in the center, pretending like everybody has their faults, and it's like, yeah, the right has its faults, but it doesn't have nearly as much power as the left does, especially on a global stage. So yeah, that's definitely my long-winded rant about this topic.
No, it's good.
All right, before we get out of here, don't forget to head over to blendernews.com where you can find all of the sources that we use throughout the podcast, and also subscribe to our newsletter, which goes out for free 5 days a week, and find other original articles as well. That's blendernews.com, BLENDR news.com. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.